sort of late and cold. But I thought to myself, I'm awake and I've been doing a lot of thinking today. Well, really over this whole week, I guess, since about Monday. And I'm just going to go ahead and hop on a video while everything is quiet in this house. I was just finishing up my friend Kate Swenson's book because I have book club on my subscriber group on Monday night. And my book club is kind of different because we only read books that the authors are willing to come on and talk to us, which makes it just sort of fun, Anyway, so this is a different conversation tonight. This is not about autism. Well, maybe it sort of is. It's not about me losing or gaining 7 pounds due to pina coladas. It's not about that. It's about small town life, which, as most of you know, I adore. I grew up what I thought was a small town of about 60,000, and that wasn't so small. They have a Target, Rocky Mount. And now I do live in an actual small town, Edenton, of about 5,000, 10,000 if you count the county, as they say around here. And it's been my home now for 20 years. We got married here. My husband's dad's family is from here. So there's a lot of history with his family. My history is mainly from Ohio, Scotland, Little England. But I was born in Eastern North Carolina, and so I do claim it as home, even if it's even if I'm not really from here. I love it. So I live in a super small place, and I write a blog with very big thoughts and feelings and sometimes opinions. And one thing you might notice about me is that I rarely, very rarely do I, never do I really chime in on local issues. So I've had 4 children in the public school system. I currently have 2 in it. My big 2 boys are off at boarding school, as most people know. And my middle 2, or I have 1 in middle school and 1 in 2nd grade. And so I've had kids in the school system for, I guess, 13 years. And my 2nd grader, this is his 8th year in the school system because he started on his 3rd birthday because he has disabilities. And I love my school system, and I live in a small town. This is my option. We have a private school, a small private school that a lot of people utilize and like, and that's nice. In fact, my daughter went there for a period of time. And we don't have any charter schools. We don't have any, that's all we have. We have 1 little private school, and we have us, Edenton Chowan Schools. And one thing that's neat about that, and this might be a long story, so I wish I'd made my tea with my new frother. But one thing that's neat about that, where I grew up in Rocky Mount, and I always went to private school. I don't know, I didn't have any choice. I was little, and my parents just threw me in school. But here, before I moved here, there used to be 2 elementary schools, Well, I think during desegregation, whatever, they made 1 big elementary school. I love that. I thought that, having gone to a private school myself, I thought, oh, it's going to be so big, and I knew the same people every year, year after year. Well, I realized that was one of the most amazing parts about being a public school student, is that every year you start over with a fresh group of people. It's kind of awesome. You get sick of somebody, you still have your same friends, but voila, you have this brand new group. Why did you pick Edenton? Well, my husband grew up here in the summers, and I don't think he could have ever been anywhere else but here. So anyway, in Rocky Mount, there were several public elementary schools. So you could have been here, there, or yonder. Where here, if you go to public school, you're all in the same elementary school. So if we have kids at church, everybody is together. So my littlest has special needs. So that's not like, well, June and so go to this public school, but you're at this public school. Everybody's together. And it's really nice. So Amos and I go to the grocery store pretty often because he likes the grocery store. It's freaking freezing outside, and we don't have a ton to do here in the winter. So going to the grocery store a couple afternoons a week is good practice for social skills, following directions, spending our local economy, building it up by buying a lot of Breyer's ice cream. So anyway, we go to the grocery store. Well, we were at the grocery store the last time, and he had 2 friends from school who I didn't know. And I'm not going to get all like weepy. So Amos has autism and a genetic disorder. There's a lot he can't tell me. He can't tell me who his friends are at school. If I say, who did you sit with at school? I can say, what classroom did you eat? And he'll say, with Miss Nixon, because he has his traditional 2nd grade class. And then he goes to the EC classroom when he needs just kind of a break. And he can say Miss Nixon's class. And I'll say, well, who did you sit with? And he'll say, I sat with everyone. Well, I go to the grocery store. Now, this is not, maybe this is a blessing in disguise, and I don't know. We have Uno grocery store. Well, I go to the Dollar General a lot for groceries, but mainly Food Line, because that's all we got. And don't go ask him if we got a Trader Joe's or a blah, 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 Harris Teeter. No, we got Food Line. And they're sort of on my X list, honestly, because there's nothing freaking in there to eat. But I'm thankful I'm not North Korea. So 2 children who I had no idea who they were, never laid my eyes on them. 1 brown boy and 1 white girl said, there's Amos, there's Amos. Both their mothers said, oh, is he in your class? Hey. And they waved to me and I waved to them. And we were getting in the car. But normally when something like that happens, I'll introduce myself and say, hey, I'm Adrian, I'm Amos's mom. And it gives me a way of knowing, like, who knows him, because he can't tell me, right? So if I'm in some big city and I go to the Teeter, that's not happening. So small town life is good for me. And I love my school system. And while a lot of us think we have choice or options, and maybe your kids go to this charter school or this magnet school, or my big 2 are boarding school, Amos is going to stay at our public school. We don't have another choice unless we want to keep him at home. And honestly, I really like our public school system. I think it's wonderful. And there might be people that'll say, well, why do you send your kids off to boarding school? I would argue it's the same as why would you go to Harvard instead of UNC Chapel Hill? You know, there's a reason Harvard is really expensive, right? Because it's, you might have access to more things. So my children are at a school where they have access to lots of different languages and opportunities. And it was a choice they were offered and they took it. And both my husband and I went to boarding school. But it doesn't mean that I don't care for and love public schools. Just like people that go to Harvard might also love UNC or NC State. Go Wolfpack, where I went. I don't know where I'm going with this. But anyway, let me go back. In our town, we are getting a new high school. It's a big deal. We have been discussing this new high school for literally years. Our high school was the only high school in the state that doesn't have like working showers. So whenever any team comes, they can't shower after a football game, right? So there's our high school, and it's a beautiful location. It's right downtown. So you have kind of the main downtown where the water is. So let's pretend this is the water here, and this is the main street over here. I live kind of over here. But if you keep going down the main street, you get to the high school. And the high school is kind of in the center of town. And Amos rides the school bus there. So I usually drive the golf cart to the high school. We have Steamers games here. And this high school is going to be torn down, and we're building a new high school. Now, years ago, the discussion was, should we put the high school in the county or in the town? Well, it was never really a question for me, but there were some people that wanted to be convinced because our middle school and our elementary school are way out in the county. And I don't know how that happened or why that happened. It always seems to me that we're spending a lot of money on gas to ship kids out there. But I think at the time the thought was, well, half the people live out here and half the people live here, and this is a middle spot. But one thing a good friend of mine, Bonnie, said, who's from out that way, out the county, is, she said, well, the thing about schools being in town is everybody goes to town anyway. You have to go to town to go to the grocery store. Most people go to town to work. So in the morning, like going to the middle school, my husband works in a little town called Gates. So there's probably 1 in 30 cars that turns left towards the county. Everybody else just goes right back to town. So it's kind of a big deal. So this high school, the thought was, well, we could build the high school out of town. It'll be cheaper. We've got plenty of land, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people really fought against that, myself included. High schools downtown, the research on them is incredible, which I didn't know at the time. I just thought, well, I'd like it, but what does the research say? Which is really important. And the research says when you have a high school downtown, you have much higher parent and community involvement, which when you live in a place like we do that is pretty high poverty, you want community involvement. You want the community or families to be able to go and watch a basketball game, or to go meet with the counselor, or to go pick up their child, or just to go pop in. It's really important. So at the time, it was voted and decided that the high school is going to be built in town. So you've got this big plot of land, and when you're looking at the land, there's a Boy Scout cabin, and it's right over here. And it's kind of beside the tennis courts, and then you've got this big building. Well, recently it came to some people's attention that the Boy Scout cabin was going to be moved. And people have gotten really upset. And the Boy Scout cabin was built in 1929. It's the oldest, the only original building on that, what they call the town common, that piece of property. And people really want it to be saved. And I agree, it's pretty neat to have a Boy Scout cabin from 1929. I will say my children did Boy Scouts for about 10 seconds, or maybe it was Cub Scouts. And the building was fine. It's never been in great condition or anything, or as my daughter says, there's, bugs in there. But anyway, the idea was that this cabin was going to be built. And earlier this week, I was at our coffee shop where everything goes down. And my mother-in-law started texting me. And she was like, they're moving the Boy Scout cabin, and you've got to save the Boy Scout cabin. I wake up to this, which is not good for me to be woken up to something like this. And she's giving my number out to people, and they're texting me. And if you know me, one thing you're going to know is that I don't offer an opinion unless I know about something. So I'm not one of those people, like a lot of people are, that jump on bandwagons because everybody else is doing it. That's not my mojo. And so I talked to a couple people that were really, really fired up and wanted it to stay. And I listened to them, and I looked into some stuff, and I said, I don't really have an opinion. I will tell you that from the outset, I am more concerned with what the General Assembly is doing that's hurting public schools in rural areas like mine. I worry that we don't have a Spanish teacher, or we don't have advanced ELA for 8th graders. These are big, big deals for me. I want Amos to have access to his typically developing peers. So those take precedent over this Cub Scout building. Doesn't mean it's not important, but everybody can't be passionate about everything, right? And so I kind of looked into it and thought, you know what? I'm just not gonna, that's not my hill to die on. And I really don't feel like making a big fuss and having people annoyed at me, because whatever you say, you're going to annoy people. I mean, if you say, well, don't let your children have Instagram before they're 15, people are going to argue with you. If you say you should let them, they're going to argue with you. And I don't mind some arguments. Yes, those are important things, said Natalie. Oh, Natalie's my friend. So, but anyway, so I kind of just let go. Well, I thought about it a little bit more, and so I talked to some more people. I talked to some people that are really familiar with historic preservation and the history in our town, and how many, so this thought that the Boy Scout hut is going to be moved, not torn down, but moved, And is that really a problem? And what I learned was we have had a lot of buildings in our town moved, and one of them is the Barker House, which is like this premier house, and it's been moved, and it's wonderful. And I would doubt now, I was thinking, what if now people are like, well, it shouldn't have been moved, we want to put it back. Well, nobody would want to, because it's in this great space. So that made me think. And then I thought to myself, there were meetings, a lot of meetings about this high school, and the whole community, like when I said I went out and talked about how I wanted the high school in town, everybody had a chance, multiple chances to give opinions. And I think this is really important to talk about because I talk to my children about this. It's like having the right to vote. So if you don't vote and then you wail and moan over Joe Biden or Donald Trump and you didn't vote, then I would tell you to shut the front door. You have no say in anything if you don't vote. Now, I don't mean this in a mean way, but there were, and I'm just going to go through this. Hi, Ann. I'm going to go through this because I think this is really important, that there were multiple opportunities for people to stand up and say, you know what? I don't know if we should move this Boy Scout hut. No one stood up. And so I think this is really a great opportunity to learn about natural consequences and how you had an opportunity and you didn't take advantage of it. And you can't now say, well, like my children, right? You know, I wish I hadn't done that, but you did. And you, just because you want something to happen, it can't, you know? So, and a lot of you might not care about this, but I think this is an important conversation. On January 26th of 2021, there was a meeting with the Boy Scouts to discuss this 1993 agreement to move the hut in the path of construction. They considered moving it to the American Legion. The Scouts asked to keep it on campus within the historic district. February 17th, 2021, site displayed a site map with the Scout Hut location on Park Avenue. So that was in a storefront downtown. There's a site map with where the Scout Hut's going to be. I saw it there. I walked down there and saw it. Also that day, our newspaper published that site map, and they put it on Facebook, which I don't really care about Facebook because the algorithm hates some of us. On March 3rd, the Chowan Herald again put the site map up, which had the Boy Scout hut relocated to Park Avenue. March 15th or April 15th, they put it back on Facebook. October 18th, 2022, they set up a meeting to consider an off-light relocation by the Scouts. The meeting was canceled because they decided they were going to use the hut for like a political campaign, something. So that didn't happen. On November 8th, they met with the Scoutmaster to consider modifications to the site on Park Avenue. December, the Scouts considered relocating to a site at the American Legion and to a site by the Board of Elections off 32. There have been time and time again meetings to discuss this. While this has been happening, a high school has been planned with geothermal heat and air. The geothermal wells are to go under this current Boy Scout hut. And the argument is being made that we can move the wells and keep the Boy Scout hut. I will say, I probably wouldn't have said this, but when I've been talking, and I've talked to people in the community, like, what do you think? And the first thing they say is, well, the Boy Scout hut is ugly as hell. Why are we leaving it there? It's not attractive. We're going to have this big, pretty school, and why do we have that? I mean, I think that's interesting to ponder. I think the argument is if it moves, it's going to be taken off the National Historic Register. But from what I understand from the National Historic Register people is it can be put back on the register once it's moved, just like the Barker House is on the register, even though it was moved. And again, this isn't something I'm like, I could take it or leave it. If everybody said, no, we want the Boy Scout hut, even if it's in front of the high school, then I'd go along with them. Like, it's not my hill to die on. But I'll tell you what my hill to die on is. At this point, the county commissioners are getting fed up. The school board wants the school in town. I think that's important to note. And the county commissioners, there are some of them that would love to have a reason to move that high school out into the county and let the town do what they want with the empty campus. Now, this is the part that I think is most important. And I'm sorry it's taken me a long time to get there. I know some of you have a life other than listening to me. I love your glasses. Where did you get them? Got them at the Eye Care Center in Edenton, Dr. Benkuski. So here's the important thing. If the county commissioners get pissed because there's a big fuss over we got to have this scout out right here, and they move the high school out to the county, and you have an empty building, do you know what the problem with that is? And I want you to listen. It is going to cost us a fortune. And do you know why that is? A charter school will move in to the old high school, and we will lose a tremendous amount of money and students. Do you know who will have to make up for the shortfall in the budget? The county commissioners. And I think the county commissioners would know this. I don't think people understand that, and I'm not against charter schools, I'm really not. But charter schools have a very difficult time finding locations, and they are like vultures. When they see the dead thing in the road, they swoop in. They swoop in. Charter schools are public schools, for anybody that doesn't know. They're just given calendar and financial flexibility that traditional public schools are not. If you don't like me chewing on this cough drop, kiss my ass. There are some that say, well, empty school buildings are a win-win because that saves taxpayers money and provides revenue to public schools. No, 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 no. No, it does not. Do you know how much money went from my school system to charter schools last year? Does anybody know? And again, this is all public information. So this is the kind of stuff you need to find these things out. $182,000 left our county and went to Poquoson Innovative Charter School in Cresswell, Beargrass in Williamston, and Neat in Elizabeth City. $180,000. The estimate that I've come up with, if that turned into a charter school, we would lose $800 or $900 per child in the school district. We would lose so many students. We would have a tremendous amount of middle-class families going to the charter school because that's typically what happens, white and black. And so you're left with lower income students in the public school system and children with disabilities, which is my son. And which is my son. David Dunn, who directs the Texas Charter Schools Association, said, charters have a huge need for suitable facilities, but it's a struggle to get districts to accept charter schools as potential lessees. Now, the reason this is because when you move a charter school into an empty public school building, not only are you giving away your revenue and you're giving away your students, you're giving a financial footing to a charter school in that area. According to Helen Ladd, who is a professor at Duke University, authorizing charter schools imposes additional cost in districts, non-urban counties. The negative financial impacts are large. The continued expansion of charter schools in non-urban districts is likely to impose an increasingly large fiscal burden over time. There are 173 charter schools in the state. In 2011, there was a cap of 100 and it was lifted. So think about Granville County Public Schools. It's a district of about 7,600 on the Virginia border. And 2 years ago, they had to close an elementary school and a middle school because of how many charter schools were coming in. And they had to close their historically black Joel Toller Elementary and Mary Potter Middle. And the school board said the loss of students to charters is impacting us. Helen Ladd at Duke said, I have mixed feelings about charter schools anywhere, but the logic of the choice component, giving students choice, makes much more sense in an urban area where there are shorter distances to travel than in rural areas. Stop! Darn cat's tearing up my chair. So even if you love the Boy Scout hut, and even if you don't care that our high school gets then put out of town, how do you feel about your tax dollars? How do you feel about losing students in your district? I don't like it. So that's why I'm speaking up. I could give two hoots about that Scout hut. I really could. But I tell you what, I sure want a new high school, and I want it to be downtown because I know that that is what research says is the best for us. We have a nice, pretty high school. We have people that come in and they love Edenton and they think it's wonderful. I'm doing a business challenge every day. I mean, we have people moving here, amazing people, and we don't want to scare them away. And we have to be educating our kids. And I think a lot of people that want that Scout hut to stay there also want the high school in town. But you might have to pick, and that's why I'm talking tonight. I'm choosing that, let's just get on with the high school, and the Boy Scout hut can be moved, and everybody's going to be fine. And just remember that there are parents like me whose children need teachers and need all sorts of things that our school system is lacking. We need volunteers. You know, I wish every person that complained about the school system would go out to the school system and help and do something. Come out there and sell candy with me at the middle school basketball game. You know, just be a part of things. Get to know Amos. Get to know what he's going to be doing. Support our superintendent. Support our school board. Support our downtown. And understand that downtown is what makes Edenton survive. And so does tourism. And you might be like, well, we're this and we're that. Well, you know what? Tourism is how we're going to live. And that's just the way it is, whether you want it to be or not. And every time somebody moves to town and you might complain, be glad that they're here and be welcoming to them. And be appreciative that we have people that care and love our community and want to be here. So sometimes you have to make a choice. And there were a lot of options here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There were 9 different highlighted public options of when you could have said, the Scout Hut's going to be on Park Avenue, and you didn't speak up. It was in the paper. It was on Facebook. There were multiple meetings. There was a site map downtown, and you didn't speak up. And so now, next time, pay better attention. You know, learn the hard way. I'm sorry that happened, but it did. But we have to get this high school. We really do. And we do not want it in the county. Mainly because you don't want a charter school coming in. You want to talk about your taxes getting raised, then welcome to that. So anyway, I'm sure I'm going to piss people off. I'm going to go to the coffee shop and they're going to be mad. But I hope everybody that watches this, most people in my town, honestly, don't really comment on my blog. They don't even acknowledge that they read it. I think it's like they would rather just wonder what I'm doing and think that I'm sort of a pain in the ass instead of like, wow, Adrian maybe has built up a pretty cool business of advocacy. I hope. I hope the truth about what I do is better than what people think about it. And so a lot of the people would never even say to me that they heard this video. So I guess I shouldn't worry about it because I do a lot to help my community. And I love it. And I want it to be good. And I want to be supportive. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to wear my ass out. I got to go to sleep so I can go teach Sunday school.